Hello, this is Deborah Clay, author of The Borrowed Boy and Just Be, and presenter of Castaway Books. Each week I invite one of my favourite authors to tell me about the books which have inspired their life and influenced their writing. This week I'm talking to Kathleen Marple Kalb, author of the Ella Shane mystery series. Hello, Kathleen. I'm delighted to welcome you to Castaway Books. I actually have just finished reading A Fatal Finale with the wonderful diva Ella Shane. Loved the book. I was just transported to a different world. Really recommend it.
Thank you so much. I love when people say that it takes them away, because that's kind of the goal with historical fiction. You want to go there.
Well, her character is incredible, and I'm so glad we can stay with her for the next two books, I think, because the next one...
At least two, yes.
Yeah.
And I'll keep writing it as long as they keep asking me to do it, so, at least two.
Well, it comes out on... The next one, A Fatal First Night, comes out on the 27th of April.
Yes.
Excellent.
And British history fans will like this one because it takes place in an opera, based on The Princes in the Tower. You just read Finale, so you know that one of the characters was working on that opera, and that's the frame for First Night. They're producing that opera, and somebody gets murdered in Richard III's dressing room.
And your protagonist, the wonderful diva Ella Shane, she has trouser rolls, which is where she sings these boys' roles that used to be for young men, isn't it? And she dresses like a man, and she does her swashbuckling and
she plays heroic male roles. And originally, at the very beginning of opera, those roles were played by castrati, which are exactly what they sound like. And amazingly enough, that wasn't a very popular career choice. Amazingly enough, guys weren't signing up for that. So they had all these really great roles. I mean, you can't have Romeo without Juliet. You can't have the Romeo and Juliet opera without somebody to sing Romeo. And somebody realized that women could sing those parts and look really good doing it. And thus we get trouser roles.
And quite risque, really, for women of that time, especially with breeches, which would perhaps be just above or below the knee. A bit cheeky, really.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is that people have said to me, why is Ella so obsessed with propriety? They want to know why she's so really hung up on I'm being very proper and appropriate. Because she plays these rather inappropriate characters, she wants everybody to know immediately she is a lady and she will be taken as such. And so that's a thing for her. Yeah.
And she's got her brother Tommy to protect her anyway, the champ.
Yeah, Tommy's a whole another discussion on himself, but he's probably my favorite non-Ella character. So yeah.
Much as I'd love to just talk about your books, because I'm just fascinated by them, having just read it, I think we'd better go on and find out your choice of 5 books, and I should just urge readers to catch up and read them themselves.
Yeah, thank you.
So what is your first book?
Jane Eyre, which is probably not a surprise that it's the first book for me. It's the first book for a lot of people, I suspect. The first really big, literary book that we read. I was in about 5th, 6th grade, around 11 years old. And it was the first time I read something that wasn't, of my own time. And she just blew me away. It was a whole different escape into a different world. And I was this, fat, awkward kid in a little town in Western Pennsylvania, and I didn't fit in. And all of a sudden, there's this whole different world and this different place to go to. And it was amazing. So
what I find surprising is when you say that you were a fat, awkward kid. When you're I know you're statuesque now, and you're a beautiful blonde. You're gorgeous.
Well, thank you. Well, but I mean, everybody is awkward when they're a kid. I mean, that's normal. It's a normal feeling. But I really was an ugly kid. I had my height early, and we don't run small in my family. And I was big. I was really heavy in my early life, and so I just didn't fit in. It was like I was a half size. Like I was the 150% version of a kid in a room full of 100%. I was just big. And it was really awkward. And then I read this book where, Jane was an entirely different sort of misfit. She was a tiny little misfit, but it really spoke to me in ways that nothing else had before. It was really neat.
Oh,
yeah.
So did you have any special friends at that age? Or
Oh yeah, we did. I mean, I actually had so, there were, fortunately, there were a bunch of other kids who kind of didn't feel they fit in either, and we all kind of hung together in a little knot, and it was good. I did have some friends who were kind of like-minded, very smart, um, people who just didn't feel that they fit in that small town kind of narrow-minded culture. So I was lucky.
do you know, it's funny. Do you think all writers or most writers consider themselves misfits? Are we a certain type?
Sometimes I think so. I know that in radio, which is my day job, we're all geeks. The joke is that in radio, the geeks run the asylum because, we were all awkward, goofy kids, and just about everybody I know was working at a radio station as a teenager, which also absolutely obviously marks you out as a weirdo. And now, so the weirdos run the place in radio. So I know we do that in radio, and I think maybe writers are a little bit like that too.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I like the idea that everything that makes you feel awkward and weird as a kid eventually becomes something a good thing as an adult. It's a good thing, and it's something I like to tell my son now too.
Absolutely. It's almost like the scales balance, they rebalance another way, don't
Yes.
they? Do you know, there's the kids that feel they don't fit and are geeky that end up very often being the successful ones for a much bigger portion of their life. But the other thing that I find interesting is the girls won't date the boys who are their age or younger because they go out with the older men. And then in a very short space of time, it completely reverses for about the next 4
Yes.
decades of our life. And the men go for the younger women.
Yeah, and what I always like to think is that, you don't, especially if you're a woman, you don't want to peak when you're 20. You don't want the best moment of your, people are always saying, my prom, my graduation, my first wedding, whatever was the best moment of my life. Well, God, if the best moment of your life came when you were 25, honey, I'm sorry for you because you got for at least 70 years to go. And I'm sorry, that's not going to be great.
Well, I reckon I've still got to peak because I've had so many great moments, but I'm waiting for the extra
exactly.
one.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that if you sell that some moment, and I'm sure maybe that may be the prettiest dress you'll ever wear, but let's hope that the rest of your life is pretty interesting.
Excellent.
So
Okay, so we're on to the next book, book 2.
yes, Die for Love by Elizabeth Peters, who is like my hero, my writing role model. This was I got this in my town library when I was in about 15, and it was the first time I realized a mystery could be funny because it's set at a romance convention and there's satire, and the main character is this very wry, smart woman, and it's very funny, and and it has a very distinctive voice that I'd never read anything like that before. I had read a lot of Victoria Holt and some of my grandfather's traditional mysteries. He had Agatha Christie and Rex Stout and a bunch of people like that. But Elizabeth Peters had this very wry, mordant voice, at least with that character and with others too. And it was a revelation to me because it was like, oh, you can be a cynical, nasty, wry, dark sense of humor person and write mysteries. That's pretty cool. And it suggested that, it kind of pointed me in the direction of finding my own voice as a writer. It was, we were still a long way away from me being a real writer, but her work is something that I've just read. I've always kept her. I read her all the time. I still, I have some of her books and I go back and reread her historical mysteries particularly. But Die for Love was the first time I realized that a mystery could be funny, and that I discovered Elizabeth Peters, which is totally worth the freight right there. So yeah.
So how old would you have been then?
15.
Right.
At 15. And I actually was writing at that point. By the time I was 16, I had written an historical fiction book that I tried to sell.
Wow. It's amazing. How did you try and sell it?
I queried. I went out and queried publishers. I mean, at that point I was very young and not very bright, and it never occurred to me that I thought that you had to pay an agent, that an agent didn't, and so I queried publishers and not agents because I didn't know any better. And I actually got a couple of editors to read it, which thank God they didn't buy it because it was really bad. But I actually got a couple people to read the darn thing. So,
That's a huge achievement. Really shows your gumption, confidence to do that at such a young age.
When you're 16, you don't know for confidence or anything. You just know, I want to try something. You don't know what you don't know.
But even writing a full novel is a big achievement at 16. It's a lot of writing.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it wasn't very good, but I finished it. So yeah,
Good down.
yeah.
So your third book.
Oh, Strong Poison by Dorothy Sayers. Oh my gosh. I was just talking about Sayers with a good friend of mine yesterday. We are both big fans. Sayers is one of those things that when you discover it, it's just all consuming. I was working in Vermont actually at this point. I had never read Dorothy Sayers until then. And they had a fairly small collection of new books, a small town, and they didn't buy a lot of new books. And I went prowling in the back stacks and found Lord Peter. And I just was so drawn in, and I mean, devoured every one of them. And Sayers' writing style and the way it's so immersive, and yet it's an incredibly solid plot from a plot standpoint. You can't argue any of it. It all fits together, and it's all perfectly there. But the characters are wonderful, and the romance part is wonderful. It's the whole package, and that was what I loved about it, was that you get everything in there, which is what I love. I still love Sayers. She's amazing.
You've picked a few English books, and you picked what you're writing has English influence as well, with the English Duke.
Yes.
So where's that come from?
I don't know. I think probably growing up in rural Western Pennsylvania, I wasn't a big American history person because I lived in not that I'm very, very proud to be American, don't get me wrong, but American history wasn't nearly as appealing to me as British history. It was like there was color and there was excitement and there were, kings and queens and princesses and Henry VIII having his wives beheaded and stuff. There was all this interesting stuff that didn't happen in American history that really was an escape for me in a way that American history just wasn't. And at least the way American history was taught in the time that I was in school, and we were kind of a backward old-fashioned town, and it was a backward old-fashioned school district, there were a lot of women in American history. American history was, the men got together and wrote the Declaration of Independence, and then the men went west. And the thing that was so appealing about British history was you had Mary Queen of Scots, who I don't like, but who was a fascinating figure. You had Anne Boleyn, poor thing. You had Elizabeth I, who was like a successful queen in her own right. Wow. You didn't have women. These women didn't exist. Abigail Adams wrote a letter to her husband saying, hey, don't forget the ladies. That's about as far as it went for women in American history as it was taught at the time that I was in school. So, if you wanted women's history, you were reading British history. So
you're right. That's that period in history is the most fascinating bit, I think. I was doing that when I was doing my, when I was 15, 16. That's the period we were studying at school. So I went on to do my A-levels in history for my 16 to 18 years, and we switched to American history, which I didn't mind. I enjoyed it. I knew nothing about American history, and I found it fascinating.
It is. And now the way the historians approach it now, they really make sure that you do get the full experience of people. It's not just a bunch of dead white guys in a room. Now we understand what it was like for women, what it was like for enslaved people. We take a look at what it was like to be just a helper in a colonial house. Laurel Thatcher Ulrich was great for this. I discovered her in college. The Good Wives, the book about women in colonial life. They really do a much better job with women's history and with the history of people of color now than they did when I was in school. And even my son's history classes are better than mine were. It's not, you're not going to have people running off to some other country's history in order to get the better experience, which I did. So
when you're writing your historical novels, do you find it how do you cope with not putting in too much of the research? The balance between the research and sharing too much of it and doing just enough. I mean, you do it perfectly, but did you?
Well, thank you. I try to keep I'm a character-driven writer. So I think about what my characters would think. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of inside baseball, but I try to make sure it's not something that's too far out there for the reader, which is so like Ella's reading a book on Anne Boleyn. Most people who are going to be reading an historical novel probably have at least a basic understanding of who Anne Boleyn is and what happened to her, and so I don't, instead of having her read, something about Isabella of Angoulême or something where who, I mean, I barely know who she is. So, you kind of want to keep it, not to say pop history, but stuff that people would have at least run across.
Yeah.
But it informed.
I came across for the first time the word velocipede. Is it how you say it? For
Oh,
the
velocipede.
yes,
Velocipede. That's
velocipede.
actually even for Ella, that's a little bit archaic. By 1899, most people are referring to them as cycles or bicycles, but velocipede is more fun to
Oh,
say, and I like it.
lovely word.
Yeah, it's fun.
I don't blame you for wanting to drop that in somewhere because it's a
It's
great
fun.
word.
And that whole thing is the cycling it's a symbol of liberation.
Mm.
It we think, oh, you got to get on a bike and just go down to work or get a little exercise. Back in 1899, it wasn't quite screaming I'm a suffragette, but it was saying I'm not going to sit in one place and wait for a man to tell me what to do. So pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are on to your the fourth book.
Yes, we're veering into history here, which is perfect because this is Alison Weir, who I am a total Alison Weir fangirl. The Lady in the Tower, which is about poor Anne Boleyn. Both her life and then how she was treated by history and the history of how she's in literature and everything after her death. There's like 2 chapters afterwards about Anne Boleyn in history that are really interesting. And I've always been a big reader of history, and I picked this up when I was when I was pregnant with my son, and we were waiting for the test to come back to make sure he was okay. And it took longer than expected, and it was a scary time. And he's fine; he's 10, and he's great, and he's wonderful. But it was a scary time. And I at that point I started reading about history as an escape, and it was an escape from the stress. And to this day, when I am in a stressful time in my life, I pick up a big, thick history book, preferably Alison Weir, but anybody who really is immersive and will get me there will do, and read history when I'm stressed out. That's what I do. I know backstabbing and beheading doesn't seem like relaxing material, but it's an escape.
Gosh, I'm not very good at reading non-fiction books. I never find them that relaxing. I have to say.
I like nonfiction because for me, particularly now that I'm writing, when I'm building a story, I don't like to read fiction because I'm terrified I'm going to accidentally steal somebody else's idea. And when I'm in the polishing stage or when I have most of the story down, that's fine. I love to read other writers' work. But at that very early stage where you're trying to get it all set out and laid out, I worry. It's nerve-wracking for me. So.
But you say your son's okay now. So
Oh, absolutely.
How long was that period of worrying?
Oh, we didn't know he was going to be okay until I was just under 6 months along. Nowadays the tests are better, but the first set of results came back ambivalent, and we had to wait, and it was really nerve-wracking. And so I was reading a lot of history because it was a way of escaping from life. So
you just had the one son, did you? You didn't have any?
I have, yeah. We have one. He's 8. He's 10, and I call him the imp. Whenever you hear me refer to the imp on social media, it's him. And it's a little big for an imp these days, though.
We've only got one. We've got a daughter.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it's lovely. Just 3 of us. We were very happy. Little group of 3 works well.
Yes. In my mind, because we didn't want to know until he was here, and in my mind, I was expecting a girl for whatever reason. And he arrived here with all of his wonderful boy energy, and it's entirely different than you're expecting. And it's amazing.
I was convinced I was having a boy. I wouldn't want to find out. I mean, now the fashion is to find out before the baby's born, but I think that takes away a lot of the joy, the surprise.
Yeah. And this may not be something that most people do, but bear in mind that we're journalists and we're pretty tough people, my husband and I both. At the very last second, we had a bet, and I lost, which is fine. Best bet I ever lost in my life.
Oh, that's lovely.
So.
Okay, so should we go on to your
yes, last book, The Merry Wives of Maggotty, which is a classic by Joan Hess, who wrote these, again, wonderful, very, very funny mysteries. I have a soft spot for funny and cozy and light mysteries. And Joan Hess's mysteries, what's particularly interesting about these is that they're set in a little tiny town, and in Arkansas, Maggotty, Arkansas. And at this time, I read this when my son was about 5, and he was getting ready to go to school. And I was starting to think to myself, what am I going to do with those 5 hours a day when he's at school? Because I work weekends. been working weekends since he was since before he was born, so that I can be at home for him. And so I work Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, and then I'm at home with him during the week. And I was thinking, I'm going to have 5 hours a day, and where I don't have anything to do, and maybe I should start writing again. That could be cool. And I was thinking, what would I like to write? And then I picked up a copy of The Merry Wives of Agony, which is this wonderfully just over the top, caper funny story. They're running around. There are moonshiners. There's a fundamentalist preacher. I don't think there's a UFO in this one, but there is in one of them. It's just insanity of all kinds in this little Arkansas town, this little tiny town. And it clicked with me because made me start thinking, gee, I lived in a bunch of tiny little towns, including one in Vermont. Maybe I should write about some weird things happening in a small town. And that's the only real similarity as far as my Vermont radio book and Merry Wives of Agony is that they take place in a small town and they're funny. But the idea of a funny small town mystery kind of clicked with me, and I thought, okay. And that kind of set me on the writing journey.
Mm-hmm. What book did that lead to?
That led to a book that I tried to sell and did not sell at that point, and it went in a drawer. And I'd kind of gotten the idea for Ella Shane, and I was working on Ella Shane while I was querying this book that didn't sell. And then I got my agent signed me and sold the book, and he's and during the period between the production for the first Ella Shane and the release, I went back to that Vermont book in the drawer and thought, gee, maybe I should revisit that in a somewhat different way. And anyway, long story short, something based on that is kind of the rework of that will be coming out from Crooked Lane next spring. Under a different name, but so nothing is ever lost. Put it in a drawer and go back to it.
Absolutely. I say that to all writers. Never throw anything away. Never think that's it, finished, because there's always a way to bring it to life at some point.
Right, and we always have that day, don't you? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I stand there. I've stood there with my memory stick in my hand and gone, okay, this is going in a drawer, and we're not going to hear from it again, and I don't want to deal with this. And sure enough, later we dig out the memory stick and we're back at it.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that one.
Yes, you will.
I am fascinated by your job. It sounds incredibly glamorous. You're an anchor for a news channel, aren't you? Tell us about that.
Oh, I'm a radio anchor. I'm on radio.
That's it. Radio anchor.
Yes, so I work from home right now because it's in the city. It's in New York, and I've been working from home for over a year now. And but when I was working in the city, and soon again, I would go into the city and be on the air Saturday and Sunday mornings from first show is 5 a.m. and the last show is 11 a.m.
5 a.m.
Oh yeah,
Crikey.
Well, when I work in the city, I have to take the last train out at night.
Gosh.
And then I get to my office at about 2, and I write till 5 and get on the air. And yeah, it's not near as glamorous as it sounds. It's just not.
What time do you have to leave home to be at work for 5 a.m.?
To be at work it's a 2 a.m. call, because I have to be 2 or 3 a.m. call because I have to write. I have to leave my house around 10:30.
Gosh.
Drive to the train station, take the train. We triangulate. My husband teaches at the main campus of UConn, which is equally far away from where we live. So we're both equally miserable. So
you're working all night, really?
Oh yeah, it's basically a night shift. Yeah. And the neat thing is it's actually much better. The timing, the one good thing about work from home, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to stay on work from home because I miss my friends, I miss my studio, I miss everything about being a news person in the newsroom. But I can get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and be on the air and not have to, and pad down to the home studio and be on the air without worrying too much. And that's worth something. Not everything, but it's worth something.
But you'll presumably go back to the traditional way of working once this is all over.
Oh yeah, we're already starting to talk about bringing people back and how it's all going to work. And none of those. Some people are back in the studio. None of these conversations are final at this point. I'm not back in the studio yet for a number of good reasons, but people are starting to filter back, and once everybody's back, it will probably be very close to what was the old normal for us, because news has to be done a certain way. I'm sorry that, it's better if you are in the studio. It's better that way. It's better for everybody. So.
Yeah. It's just the light suddenly, bright
Yeah.
sunlight came in. And I said,
Yeah. It looked like a rainbow. It's kind of cool. There was a rainbow there for a second. It's kind of cool.
I had to turn off one of the lights.
Oh.
No, it's the evening sun comes in through this window, and here in England, we've had, in the south part of England where I live, we've had bright sunshine and snow, which is bizarre. April.
Do you get a snowball like a rainbow with snow? Because it's very rare, but once in a while it does happen in New England.
Whoa. Maybe it's so rare for us to have sun and snow, although we do have weird weather. But I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I've only seen one, and I mean, I live in Connecticut now, which is technically New England, and I lived in northern New England. I've lived in the Northeast for most of my adult life, and I've only seen one maybe once or twice. But you can get a rainbow effect with the snow. It's super cool.
Does it look different to an ordinary rainbow?
It glitters a little bit. It's really cool. It's very cool.
Unicorns and.
Yeah, it's rare. It's extremely rare, but it's a lot of fun. It's like a glittery rainbow. It's very cool.
I should be looking for one when we finished.
Yes, like I said, it's so rare, but it's so cool. It's really, and you feel like, people feel like rainbows are lucky for a reason because it's an unusual and wonderful thing, So
yeah, excellent. Okay, we've got through all 5.
Wow, yes, we have. How cool is that?
That seemed to fly by.
Yes.
Tell me, you've got one more question for you.
Yes.
And that is, what luxury will you take with you on your island? Given that, because I know all authors would say that they'd wanted books and they'd want to write. So all of your writing and reading needs are taken care of. So what's the one luxury you'd have?
Oh, it's chocolate. I'm easy. It's chocolate. I got to have my chocolate. So, yeah.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're by yourself with your books, you kind of don't need the wine to unwind anymore. And eventually you'll figure out how to see your family. But chocolate, you gotta have.
Excellent, great. Well, when this broadcast comes out, you would have had your first night. A Fatal First Night would have been out for about a week. So
cool.
People listening can go out and get both of them, a Fatal Finale and a Fatal First Night.
Great. Thank you very much.
Congratulations on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of Castaway Books. References for all of the books discussed in this show can be found on my website, which is www.abrakdeborah.wordpress.com. It's the letter K and then my name, Deborah, Deborah. So until next week, goodbye.